There is a moment, right before everything changes in your life, when the future is so close you can almost feel it. The door is cracking open. The dream is beginning to take shape. The blessing is forming in the invisible places. And in that exact moment, most people do one thing that destroys it all. They open their mouth. And I know how that sounds. Simple, maybe even obvious. But I want you to stay with me, because what I am about to walk you through today is not advice you will find in any book on a bestseller list. This is not a collection of motivational phrases designed to make you feel good for 20 minutes before you forget them. What I am about to share with you is ancient. It is tested. It has been proven through slavery and betrayal and exile and fire and prison cells and palace corridors across thousands of years of human history. There are 6 things you must never reveal. 6 categories of sacred territory in your life that require not silence out of fear, but silence out of wisdom. Silence as a shield. Silence as a strategy. Silence as the most powerful decision you will ever make. And here is what haunts me most about this truth. The thing that quietly dismantles so many good, sincere, well-meaning people is rarely the enemy charging at them from the outside. It is their own words, their own timing, the dream they announced before the season was ready, the wound they handed to the wrong hands, the sacred thing they poured out in front of people who were never meant to hold it. I want you to think back right now. Think about the last time something extraordinary was growing in your life. A new beginning, a business idea that had you awake at night with excitement, a relationship that felt different from anything you had experienced before, a spiritual shift, a turning point, a sense that God was finally moving in the direction of everything you had prayed for. And then you told someone, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, maybe someone you trusted completely, and something shifted. Not immediately, not in some obvious dramatic way, but slowly, quietly, the energy changed. The momentum stalled. The excitement that had been so alive inside you began to leak away. And you could not explain it. You just felt it. The thing that had been so full of life began to die. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern. And today, we are going to name it. We are going to walk through 6 specific areas of your life where your silence is not weakness, where your stillness is not passivity, where saying nothing is the most active and intentional and spiritually powerful choice you can make. Are you ready? Because this is going to change the way you think about everything. Let us begin with a young man. 17 years old, the 11th of 12 brothers, son of a farmer, beloved by his father above all the others. His name was Joseph. Joseph was not a complicated person. He was not scheming or calculating or politically ambitious. He was just a boy who loved his father, worked hard in the fields, and one night had an experience that shook him to his core. He had a dream, not the kind of dream that fades by morning, the kind that blurs at the edges and loses its color before you even climb out of bed. This was the other kind, the kind that is so vivid, so clear, so saturated with meaning that it stays with you through breakfast and through the afternoon and through the following week and through the rest of your life. He and his brothers were in the fields binding sheaves of grain, and suddenly, his brothers' sheaves all turned and bowed down to his. Then he dreamed a second time. The sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to him. Now I want you to sit inside this moment with Joseph for just a few seconds, because what he experienced was real. What he received was genuinely from God. Every single detail of that dream would eventually come true. Years later, in a palace in Egypt, surrounded by power and wealth and the authority to save an entire civilization from starvation, his brothers would bow before him exactly as the dream had promised. The dream was not the problem. What happened next was the problem. Joseph woke up and could not contain it. The vision was too alive, too overwhelming, too extraordinary to hold inside a 17-year-old chest. So he ran to his brothers. He sat down with them. He looked them in the eyes and told them everything. Every detail, every image, every implication. And the Bible does not soften what happened. It says his brothers hated him all the more. Not a little more. All the more. His own blood. The people who shared his childhood, his father, his memories, his meals. They heard the dream God had placed in this boy's heart, and they responded with hatred. But it did not stop there. The hatred grew into conspiracy. The conspiracy grew into violence. They grabbed him, stripped him of the coat his father had given him, threw him into a pit, sat down to eat their lunch while he cried out below them, and then sold him to slave traders passing by for 20 pieces of silver. They took the coat, soaked it in goat's blood, and carried it back to their father. And Jacob, who had loved Joseph more than any of his other children, tore his own clothes and wept and refused to be comforted. Joseph was gone, carried in chains into Egypt, into slavery, into a foreign land where he knew no one and no one knew him and no one cared whether he lived or died. All of this set in motion by one conversation, one moment of premature disclosure. Now I want to be very clear about something. Joseph did not deserve what happened to him. His brothers' cruelty was their own choice and their own sin. Joseph was innocent. What was done to him was unjust. But here is the lesson that Joseph himself eventually understood, years later, looking back at the full arc of his life. Some things are too sacred to share before their time. Some seeds, if exposed to the wrong environment too early, do not grow. They are destroyed. Not because the seed was bad, not because the dream was false, but because the timing was wrong and the audience was wrong and the world was not yet ready to hold what God had placed inside him. There is a wisdom in this that goes far beyond managing jealousy or avoiding difficult conversations. This is about understanding that certain visions are entrusted to you specifically, privately, intentionally, because God is doing something in you that requires privacy to develop. Like a plant that grows in the dark before it ever pushes through the soil. Like a child that forms in the hidden place before the world ever sees its face. The dream that God gives you is a seed. And seeds do not grow in front of an audience. They grow underground, out of sight, in silence, where no wind can uproot them before their roots are deep enough to hold. Proverbs says to guard your heart above all else, because everything you do flows from it. I want to extend that to you today. Guard your vision the same way. Guard the plans God has whispered to you in the quiet hours. Guard the future He has shown you before it has arrived. Ask yourself honestly, with real seriousness, who in your life right now has the spiritual depth, the genuine love for you, and the wisdom to carry the weight of what God has told you? Who has demonstrated over time that they can hold your dreams without crushing them? Who has shown you that your sacred things are safe in their hands? If you cannot name that person with absolute certainty, do not name the dream at all. Not yet. Wait. Pray. Let the season come to you instead of chasing it. Because the tree that grows slowly, in secret, without applause or acknowledgement, is always the one that cannot be uprooted when the storm arrives. Now let me shift to something that might catch you off guard. Because this next truth cuts directly against everything our culture tells you to celebrate. We live in a world that rewards visibility. Generosity needs a post. Sacrifice needs a caption. Kindness needs documentation, or it practically did not happen. And I understand why. There is something deeply human about wanting to be seen, wanting to be known, wanting the good we do to be acknowledged. That desire is not inherently corrupt. But somewhere along the way, the desire for acknowledgement crossed a line into something that quietly hollows out the very goodness it claims to celebrate. Jesus addressed this directly, not gently, not ambiguously. He said, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." And then he said the sentence that should stop every one of us cold. He said, "If you do that, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." No reward. That is not a soft warning. That is a categorical statement. It means the same act of generosity, the exact same donation, the exact same sacrifice, the exact same hour of service can either produce eternal reward or produce absolutely nothing, depending entirely on the audience you choose. Let me tell you about two people. The first is a man of means, respected in his community. He gives regularly, genuinely, from a heart that contains real compassion. But he makes sure people know. His name appears on the right plaques. He mentions his giving at the right dinners. He posts about it in ways that feel humble but ensure visibility. And people admire him. They praise him. They tell him what a good man he is. The second is a widow. Old, poor, wearing clothes that have seen better decades. She walks quietly into the temple one afternoon and drops 2 small copper coins into the offering box. No one notices. No one turns to look. The coins are worth almost nothing by any practical measure. And Jesus watched both of them. Then he called his disciples close and pointed to the widow. He said, "I tell you the truth. This woman has given more than all the others combined. They gave out of their abundance. She gave out of her poverty. She gave everything she had to live on. 2 coins. That is all she had." And 2,000 years later, every week, in churches and cathedrals and small living rooms and prison chapels around the world, her story is still being told. Her invisible act became the most visible act of generosity in the entire gospel. Silence multiplied her offering beyond anything money could measure. And here is the deeper danger of announcing your goodness that nobody talks about openly. When you broadcast your generosity, you invite comparison. Someone will always say you did not give enough. Someone will always find a reason to question your motive. Someone will always find a way to shrink what you did until it fits into a narrative that does not threaten their own comfort. But in the silence, in the private space where only God sees, there is no critic. There is no audience waiting to grade your performance. There is only a Father who sees in secret and, as Jesus promised, rewards openly. Do good. Give quietly. Serve without the announcement. Help without the hashtag. Let the God who needs no documentation be your only audience. Because his memory is perfect and his rewards are eternal, and his approval is the only one that will still matter when everything else is faded. Now stay with me, because what comes next is the most dangerous truth of all. And if this one does not settle deep into your spirit, everything else I say today will be incomplete. His name was Samson, and I want you to hear this story as if for the very first time. Because Samson is usually reduced to a cautionary tale about a man who was weak around women. And that reading misses everything. Samson was not just a strong man with long hair. Samson was a walking miracle of God. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him with power that defied every natural law. He tore a lion apart with his bare hands while traveling through a vineyard, and the text says he did it as easily as tearing a young goat. He struck down 30 men to settle a bet. He killed 1,000 Philistine soldiers using nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. He was a judge of Israel, chosen before birth, set apart by God, anointed with an authority that his enemies could not match on any field. But Samson had a weakness that his enemies had learned to identify, and they sent Delilah. Now I want you to understand the setup here. Delilah was not a stranger. She was someone Samson loved, or at least believed he loved. The Philistine lords came to her privately and offered her 1,100 pieces of silver each if she could discover the secret of his strength. And she accepted. So she began to ask, night after night, conversation after conversation, wrapped in warmth, in intimacy, in the language of love and closeness and trust. Where does your strength come from? What is the secret of this power? Tell me. If you loved me, you would tell me. 3 times Samson gave her false answers. He tested her. He watched her immediately pass the information to his enemies. He saw the trap closing around him and kept walking toward it. And then, worn down by her persistence, disarmed by proximity, exhausted by the repetition of the question, he told her everything. He said, "No razor has ever touched my head. I have been set apart to God from before I was born. If my hair is shaved, my strength will leave me. I will become like any other man." And that night, while he slept, she had his head shaved. And when he woke and the enemy was upon him, the Bible uses the most chilling phrase in all of its pages. It says, he did not know that the Lord had left him. He did not know. He woke up. He stood up. He moved. He probably began to flex with the old confidence, expecting the familiar surge of power to rise up through his body. And it did not come, because it was gone. And he had no idea when it left. He had no idea how long he had been operating on momentum while the source had quietly withdrawn. Think about what that means for a moment. Really sit with it. The idea that a person can lose the divine anointing so gradually, so quietly, so seamlessly that they continue going through the motions completely unaware. Still talking, still performing, still showing up. But the presence that made it matter The power that made it real is no longer there. And all of it came from one conversation with the wrong person about the wrong thing at the wrong time. Here is what I need you to understand. I am not telling you to carry your pain alone until you collapse under the weight of it. That is not the lesson. Real community requires real honesty. The scripture is full of the value of bearing one another's burdens, of confessing and being healed, of iron sharpening iron. Those things are true and they are necessary. The word that changes everything is this one. With whom? Not everyone who sits at your table is safe. Not everyone who says they love you is equipped to carry your vulnerability without using it. Before you disclose the tender places of your life, the real struggles, the genuine battles, the secrets that matter most, pray first. Ask God specifically, who has the character, the spiritual maturity, and the genuine love for me to hold this without exploiting it? Who will intercede rather than investigate? Who will strengthen me rather than use what I share as a map to my most vulnerable places? And if that person has not yet become clear to you, then go to God first. He already knows every detail. He has seen every corner of your struggle before you even formed the words to describe it. He will not grow tired of hearing it. He will not leak it to your enemies. He will not use it against you in a moment of conflict. Start there. Let God be your first and most trusted confidant, and let Him, in His timing, bring you to the right human voice when the season is ready. Now I want to speak to something holy, and I want to ask you to open your heart to this one in particular, because it may be the area where the most damage is being done in your life right now. There is a kind of relationship that was never designed to survive constant public exposure. I am talking about the covenant between two people who have stood before God and given themselves to each other completely. We live in a world that has turned marriage into entertainment. We have watched so many seasons of television programs built around the collapse and conflict of relationships that we no longer recognize the sacred when we see it. We have been trained to see the private struggles of a marriage as something shareable, something relatable, something to post about and commiserate over. But marriage is not content. Marriage is holy ground. And when you bring the private landscape of your covenant into the public square, when you share your partner's failures with your friends, when you vent about your relationship to people who do not love your partner the way you do, when you allow the tender and difficult interior of your marriage to become conversation at dinners or on social media, you are doing something that no amount of reconciliation may fully undo. Think about what happens. You go through a hard season with your husband. The communication breaks down. Old patterns resurface. There are nights where the distance between you feels impossible to cross. And in that pain, you reach out to a friend. And you tell her everything. Every cruel word. Every failure. Every moment where he was not who you needed him to be. And she listens. And she sympathizes. And you feel, at least temporarily, a little less alone. But here is what you cannot take back. She now carries an image of your husband that he did not consent to creating. And long after you and your husband have found your way back to each other, long after forgiveness has been extended and the season has turned and the love between you has been renewed, she still has that image. And it shapes how she sees him at every dinner and every birthday and every family gathering. And it shapes the advice she gives you the next time things get hard. And without meaning to, without ever intending harm, you recruited an adversary into a covenant you had already sealed. This is why the scripture treats marriage as something to be held with reverence and privacy. What God has joined together is not a subject for public debate. When things are difficult, seek wisdom from someone who is genuinely committed to the health of your relationship. A pastor, a counselor, someone who loves you both and whose goal is restoration, not validation of your grievance. And when things are beautiful, protect that beauty too. Not every tender moment needs documentation. Some things are most precious precisely because they belong to no one else. Guard the sacred things. Now let us go deeper. Because this next truth is one that most people have never heard articulated this clearly, and I believe it may be the most practically powerful thing I share with you today. There are battles that God designs to be fought in complete private, not because He is indifferent to your suffering, not because community is unimportant, but because the victory he is preparing you to carry cannot survive the weight of too many witnesses before it is complete. The Spirit of God led Jesus into the wilderness. Not pushed, not tricked, not abandoned there by circumstance. Led, deliberately, intentionally, guided by the very presence of God into a place of isolation, physical depletion, and direct spiritual attack. For 40 days, Jesus ate nothing. 40 days without food, without shelter, without the warmth of a community around him, without the encouragement of the disciples he had not yet called. Just the wilderness and the silence, and then Satan. And Satan came with precision. He did not attack clumsily. He came with 3 targeted, carefully constructed temptations, each one designed to strike at the core of Christ's identity. Turn these stones to bread. Prove your power. Meet your own need. Throw yourself from the temple. Make God prove his love for you. Turn faith into a performance. Bow to me, and I will give you everything. Take the shortcut. Skip the cross. Each temptation was framed as a reasonable option. Each one contained just enough truth to feel legitimate. And each one, if accepted, would have dismantled everything that the Son of God had come to accomplish. And Jesus answered every single one with the Word of God, quietly, without panic, without spectacle, without needing anyone to witness the victory. When it was finished, the angels came and ministered to him. The reward came after the private battle. I want you to understand what this means for your life right now. There are seasons you are in, maybe a season you are in right at this moment, where God is doing something in the hidden places of your character that cannot survive an audience. He is pressing out of you an impatience that could ruin your future. He is burning away a pride that would destroy the very blessing he is building toward. He is building in you a faith that can only be developed in the dark, under pressure, when there is no one watching and nothing to perform for. If you announce every spiritual battle before it is won, if you broadcast every dark night of the soul, if you post every moment where your faith is wavering and your grip is slipping and you are not sure you can hold on, you open yourself to something that sounds helpful but is often harmful. Well-meaning people with advice that is not aligned to your specific assignment from God. And something even more sobering. The enemy, who uses the intelligence of your declared weakness to press harder against the very places you have just advertised. Some victories must be won in the hidden place first. Some testimonies must be fully completed before they are offered. Some seasons of silence are not punishment. They are the forge. They are the furnace. They are the place where the raw material of your faith is being shaped into something that can carry the weight of everything God intends to place on it. Fight the battle first. Win it in prayer and fasting and the Word and the long nights of crying out to God with no one watching. And then, when the victory belongs fully to you, when the testimony is whole and complete and ready to become a weapon that sets someone else free, then speak. Then share. Then let what God built in the darkness become a light for someone still searching for the door. But first, fight. And now I want to close with the most nuanced truth of all. And if everything else I have shared today was important, this final piece is the one that pulls it all together into something you can carry for the rest of your life. God gives certain people a gift. Not everyone receives it in the same measure. But some people are wired differently. They walk into a room and they know things that were not spoken. They sense the temperature of a relationship before anyone has said a word. They can feel the motive beneath the smile, the deception beneath the warmth, the danger beneath the invitation. They see what others are completely blind to. This is the gift of discernment, and it is extraordinary. And it comes with a responsibility that most people who carry it are never taught. Because the most common mistake that people with this gift make is announcing what they see, revealing what they know, exposing what they have discerned too quickly to the wrong people before the timing is right. And it costs them everything. Think again about Jesus. He demonstrated a perception throughout the Gospels that was consistently staggering. He saw into the hearts of the Pharisees who were trying to trap him with clever questions. He knew when someone was testing him versus genuinely reaching for truth. He perceived the spiritual condition of every person he encountered, the woman at the well, the rich young ruler, the tax collector in the tree. He saw them more fully than they saw themselves. And he knew about Judas. Not at the Last Supper, not at the moment of arrest. He knew from the beginning. The Gospel of John tells us that Jesus knew from the start which of his disciples did not genuinely believe and who would betray him. He lived with that knowledge. He broke bread with Judas. He washed his feet. He gave him the honored seat at the table. And at the Last Supper, surrounded by all 12, he said only this: "One of you will betray me. One of you. That is all." He did not stand and point. He did not name the name. He did not expose the conspiracy publicly in a way that would have shattered the room and potentially disrupted everything that had to happen next. He saw everything. He revealed it strategically, not to protect Judas, but because God's plan required a particular sequence of events, and premature disclosure would have disrupted what the full arc of history required. Joseph carried this same tension. In his youth, he spoke the dream and was sold into slavery. By the time he stood before Pharaoh, older, shaped by years of silence and suffering and patience, he understood something he had not known at 17. The gift is not just about what you see. It is about when you speak what you see, and to whom, and in what context, and for what purpose. Here is what I need you to hold on to if you carry this gift. When God shows you something about a person, about their character, their motives, their hidden agenda, there is almost always a gap between when you receive that revelation and when it is right to act on it. And that gap is not emptiness. That gap is not wasted time. That gap is God aligning circumstances you cannot see from where you are standing. It is God protecting you from consequences you have not yet anticipated. It is God preparing the people involved for what is coming, so that when it arrives, the ground is ready for it. If you rush the gap, if you speak too soon, several things happen, and none of them are good. You may damage a relationship based on partial information. God may have been showing you the beginning of a story, not the conclusion. What you saw was real, but incomplete, and acting on incomplete information has its own consequences. You alert the enemy that you can see them, and they adjust. They recalibrate. They cover their tracks. The strategic advantage of discernment lies entirely in the other side, not knowing you have it. The moment you announce what you know, you surrender that advantage entirely, and you risk being dismissed as paranoid or critical or divisive. Not because you were wrong, but because the moment was wrong, because the ground was not yet prepared to receive what you were holding. Proverbs says a person of understanding remains silent, not afraid, not passive, not powerless, strategically, intentionally, prayerfully silent, holding what they know, praying over it, letting God confirm it, moving only when He releases them to move. Your discernment is a weapon, and the most effective weapons are always the ones the enemy does not know you have. Now I want to close with something personal, something I want you to carry out of this story and into the rest of your day and week and year. Think right now about the last 12 months of your life, not in a general way. Specifically, think about the dream you announced too early and watched stall before it ever had a chance to breathe. Think about the struggle you shared with someone who was not equipped to hold it, and how that moment of vulnerability later became something used against you. Think about the beautiful thing growing in your life that seemed to wither right after you told someone about it. Think about the relationship that suffered because you brought outside voices into a space that was meant to stay between you and one other person. What if some of that, not all of it, but some of it, could have been protected by one simple, difficult, costly choice? The choice to be still. I am not asking you to build walls. I am not asking you to become someone who trusts nothing and shares nothing and carries every burden alone until something breaks. That is isolation, and isolation is its own kind of prison with its own kind of darkness. What I am asking is something harder than that, because it requires not just self-control, but spiritual maturity. Before you speak, pause. Before you share, pray. Before you disclose, discern. Is this the right person? Is this the right time? Am I moving with God or ahead of Him because the waiting has become uncomfortable? And then trust the answer, even when the answer is not yet. Because not yet is not no. Not yet is God still working in the invisible places. Not yet is the seed still underground, still in the dark, still developing roots strong enough to hold the tree that is coming. not yet his protection dressed in the clothing of delay. Joseph waited in a prison cell for years. He was faithful in the darkness. He interpreted dreams and asked the men he helped to remember him, and they forgot. He stayed faithful when there was no visible reason to be. And one morning, Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret, and a man who had been in prison with Joseph suddenly remembered. And Joseph was brought before the most powerful leader in the world. And everything changed. Not eventually. That morning. All at once. Because the silent season had finished its work. Your silent season is not a detour. It is the road. It is the exact path God has chosen for the exact thing He is building in you. And when the time comes, when He says now, when the door opens and the season turns and the moment arrives that all the silence was preparing you for, you will be ready. Because you will have protected the seed until it became a tree. You will have guarded the vision until the vision became a reality. You will have held the sacred things sacred until the sacred things were fully formed and fully powerful and fully ready to change everything around you. Guard your peace. Guard your vision. Guard the plans and the relationships and the battles and the gifts and the dreams and the discernment that God has placed inside your hands. And let silence be your strategy. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of shame, but the silence of someone who knows exactly what they are carrying and exactly how precious it is and exactly how much it costs to receive it. That kind of silence is not weakness. That kind of silence is armor. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for you.